Now in Unit 10 we come to what is often considered the climax in the book of Genesis. The climax of the patriarchal stories, Genesis 22, that's often referred to as the binding of Isaac in artworks of painting, sculpture. This scene of the testing of Abraham's faith is the climax of the narrative that began in Genesis 11 and will conclude in Genesis 25, the story of Abraham. The narrative tensions around Abraham's growing faith are resolved as he is willing to follow God's instruction to give up that which was most dear to him, the son named Isaac. The narrator introduces this account by informing us that this is a test of faith from God. As Bruce Waltke in his commentary calls it, the crisis of Abraham's faith and the promises and provisions of God will be of no greater consequence than this particular testing. God's demanding call and Abraham's radical obedience here match the opening scene in Genesis chapter 12, the account of Terah's descendants moving forth into a promised future and a promised land. The repetition of the Hebrew phrase Lech Lecha connects the two accounts in Genesis 12:1 and here in Genesis 22:2. This phrase, which introduced in Genesis 12 that radical departure from the world of norms of Mesopotamia to follow God by faith to an unknown land, is now being used to bring a climax to the life of Abraham, with his willingness to follow God by faith into a new realm of personal sacrifice, his willingness to give up his only son, whom he so dearly loved. This phrase is used in Genesis 22 to introduce this climax, his willingness to follow God by faith to a new realm of personal sacrifice, his willingness to give up his only son, whom he so dearly loved, would only be surpassed by God's own willingness to give up his only unique son for the redemption of fallen humanity, a process that began with the call of Abraham. The fourfold identity of Isaac as your son, your only one, whom you love, Isaac, is the ultimate Hebrew expression of emphasis. If you say something 3 times in Hebrew, it's for strong emphasis. If you say it 4 times, it is of ultimate importance in the Hebrew narrative. God's intervention in the near sacrifice of Isaac in this ultimate test of faith would then be followed by the reiteration of the covenant promises in Genesis 22, of Yahweh's self-swearing oath, a great blessing to Abraham and his family, the giving of innumerable descendants, multitudes like the seashore sands, and the ultimate blessing to all of the nations. That covenant promise which was ultimately fulfilled in Jesus Christ.